Captain Soko. Spock was Vulcan as a motherfucker. Hello interwebs, I hope you're all doing well because I am here to review yet another episode of my favorite show, Star Trek Lower Decks Season 4, Episode 5, I think we're at now, Empathalogical Fallacies. I think I said that word right, Empathalogical. As many of you know, if you've been watching my channel for any amount of time, do not come to my channel for pronunciation of words correctly. Actually, to quick address that, I know I don't say words correctly a bunch of the time. I am very bad at pronunciations. I try my best. I know even with names, I try my best to get names correct, but for some reason my brain doesn't remember names very well and my mouth does not say words correctly. So I'm just trying my best. I do apologize for that. Anyways, now that I've gone on this whole other side tangent, let's actually talk about this episode, and I will stay spoiler-free up front. As per usual, what a shock. This is another really great episode of Lower Decks, but specifically I like this one a lot because it's our first T'Lyn-focused episode. We've had her be about in the past few episodes and being a good, like, bouncing off of other characters, but this is the first one that really feels like it is her episode, and it is really, really, really good. There's a lot of, like, fun stuff that happens based on, you know, her arc dealing with, like, being a Vulcan on a ship full of mostly non-Vulcans and having to deal with emotions, but I really love how this show, like, threads the needle of, like, her being a Vulcan and from a Vulcan background, but as we saw back when she was first introduced in season 2, she's a slightly atypical Vulcan, and the show just does a great job with, like, threading that, like, in-between worlds that she kind of has, both being a Vulcan who is considered atypical by Vulcan society, but also being a Vulcan among humans now, and I think that balance is well struck in a very interesting and a very heartwarming and cathartic way in this episode that I really, really enjoyed. The second thing I love about this episode is there's so many great lines. Just, I am not going to be able to say them all. Like, Lower Decks is filled with, like, great jokes, but this one in particular, there's just, like, so many things randomly happening at a bunch of different moments that I loved, that I just, this episode is endlessly quotable for numerous reasons. And also, there's a nice little send-up to, like, specific weird parts of the Next Generation, that we've gotten hinted at in here in Lower Decks with, like, I think back in, what was it, season 2 with the, like, fantasy ship and, Billup's family, but here really gets honed in on in a very specific way that we'll get to when I get to spoilers, but it was a lot of fun in those aspects. And then another element I liked this episode for was that it teamed up Boimler and Shaq. So we've gotten little hints about, we haven't had full episode with those two characters like really bonding, and the resolution to their storyline is, I think, endearingly sweet, and I really adored it. So yeah, this was I think a really strong episode, especially based off of T'Lyn's arc, but the rest of this episode just has a lot of fun in terms of the jokes. So let's get into spoilers to talk about all of them. Alright, the episode starts off where we have these Betazoids coming onto the ship, and I love that they're just called, like, glorified socialites by T'Lyn, and that they came from Angel 1 because, of course, the Betazoids would go to Angel 1, which is the all-women, very matriarchal and sexist planet that we saw in season 1 of TNG.
Aphrodisiac is something used to stimulate or enhance sexual pleasure.
How does stimulation of the olfactory nerves affect the enjoyment of sex?
So of course they'll be going there and having been partying there and going to Risa now. I love that the one of them has, like, the hat that says it's Romulan 8 o'clock sometime, which is perfect. I want that hat. I'm sure they're gonna sell it in merchandise somewhere. But the other one that I loved is I loved the joke where there was the one that hit on Ransom, but because he was too, like, easy to get because he's Ransom, he's just kind of like our Riker guy on here. He's always like, yeah, I'll be with whoever I wants in on me. She's like, no, you're too easy to get. I'll go after Freeman. And I liked this also too, that it was like a woman showing attraction to another woman, showing some sexuality. Yes, for a joke, but you know, Star Trek, especially in the past few seasons on, like, Strange New Worlds and elsewhere, has played down like the queer content, and that made me a little bit sad. So I'm glad to see that that's still not being downplayed here on Lower Decks. So we still get references to queerness and people being very open sexually across the show. So that I really did enjoy. I also loved the weird little, like, lore tidbit that apparently Caitians used to hunt down Betazoids years ago, and, like, T'Ana throughout the episode being like, I'm gonna hunt them down, like, let me get, like, their tasty, you know, bodies or whatever it was. And the, like, one person even saying, like, oh, she's been warned not to eat people, just, like, as a matter of fact, like, this has happened before. That's very funny. So I love that, like, weird little bit of lore of, like, Betazoids used to be hunted by Caitians. Nice little strange connection there that never existed before, at least to my knowledge. We also then get Boimler starting his arc where he's just he's overcompensating. He's like, he's working too hard. He doesn't need to know the name of every single. It's nice to know the name of the people that work for you. That's a good sign of a good boss. But he's overdoing it, trying to like deeply memorize every single person, and so gets sent to the program by Rutherford. And again, I really love something that will get reiterated at the end of this episode. But like, Shax just considers so many people part of his bear pack. You don't have to just be on the security team to be considered part of the bear pack, and I love that. And that extends to obviously Boimler this episode, as we will see. So love that. Again, the endearing sweetness, caring, kindness of Star Trek Lower Decks just always shines through, and I love it to death. But then this brings us to Lynn being impatient. And again, it goes to like her being an atypical Vulcan, right? Like, she wants to send this message saying, hey, this is my punishment, I want off the ship. So she feels like she's an outsider on the Cerritos as a Vulcan. But also, she's still in like an outsider from Vulcan, saying like, no, I guess I was wrong, I shouldn't have been so impulsive. But she is still impulsive here, as she's impatient waiting for her message to get out, and has to like be like, all right, I'll go and see if I can inquire about whether or not the communications will be back up. That's obviously not going to do anything. She's obviously just like going to have to wait. But again, it just shows like even when she's trying to like be full Vulcan woman, she's still not fully like fitting in as a Vulcan would. The logical thing would be just to wait or whatever, be patient, meditate, whatever. So I love the like little hints that she is atypical, which I enjoy, as it'll come back. Then I'm just gonna focus on the T'Lyn storyline. I'll get to the Boimler storyline next, but everything with T'Lyn was a lot of fun, where she goes into the bar and everyone's freaking out, like Tendi just being like hyper like friendship, like hyper loving. He's like, oh, we're the best friends, I want to give you a hug, everything. Like all of that was just wonderful, every single note of that. This is where all the jokes came in, like Miggly Mo like getting upset about not being regurgitated soup that he ordered from the replicator, and like destroying it was great. Ransom crying because he got dumped. Rutherford being just so like just out there was great. And then them thinking that it's the Betazoids causing it. And that would make sense, considering we saw Loxana Troy way back in The Next Generation, always like affecting people with her minds, but even more specifically in the Deep Space Nine episode, where we did learn about Xanthi fever, and it did cause everyone on Deep Space Nine to like kind of go wild and like love each other and all that jazz, which was an interesting episode. I don't know if it's a good one.
I wonder what Kamala Cisco wanted.
I can wait.
Oh, this is very embarrassing.
But it's certainly a fun one in terms of it's being a weird thing in Star Trek lore. There is a thing in Star Trek, isn't it? Like, I've talked about this before, but like every Star Trek series, I think, has an episode where like people just get horny and want to fuck each other. Like the Naked Time in the original series, Naked Now in TNG, that episode of Deep Space Nine. Did Voyager have Everyone Wants to Fuck episode? Enterprise definitely did with Bound. Put in the comments, you remember if Voyager had a Everyone Wants to Fuck episode. I'm sure there must have been. But anyways, moving on. I love that they go and scan these Betazoids, and like he was like, oh yeah, come on, we're women of a certain age, like menopause joke, which is good. Kind of was what the Deep Space Nine episode was about. But they're like, no, we're not doing anything. And I like Mariner being like, Mom, they didn't do anything. But Freeman being like, no, something's up here. I'm gonna put you in the brig, and them actually having something up with them, just not what they think. And so I love Mariner standing up for the right thing, but Freeman actually sensing that something was off. I also, by the way, I love this like subtle change in Freeman and Mariner's relationship this year. We've seen a few times this season, and it's most pointed here, where like Mariner and Freeman just trust each other now. Like Mariner being like, I want to help my mommy, or which is adorable, her saying that. Or also like, yeah, I have a hot mom, or like them bouncing back and forth. Like there's an implicit trust between them, and like bouncing off of each other, that even when like disagree, they still like respect each other, that they didn't have, all the way back in season 1 or even last season.
We may want to roll out some duty changes to make a good first impression. You get me?
You better be ready to shovel some f***ing pie, Marty.
As we saw at the end of last season, but now that they've grown and to trust each other, I like that there's this subtle shift in their relationship. So just nice subtle writing. It's not like beaten over the head. It's not drawn attention to, but it is there. So I do really, really like that in terms of the arc of their relationship. But then this brings us to Lynn eventually learning that it is her who is causing the problem with everyone freaking out emotionally, because she is having some sort of like early onset Bendai syndrome or something like that. Same thing that Spock's father dealt with, which was very akin to Alzheimer's in that show, but clearly this is a different version of it for Vulcans that is like just affecting telepathically other people because she is emotionally dealing with a lot. And I buy that for Vulcans, that Vulcans, if they do feel a lot of anxiety, that it would express itself going elsewhere, because we know Vulcans are powerful telepaths. They just and have powerful emotions. They just repress it. But T'Lyn not being able to do that, she views herself as less of a Vulcan, and Mariner being the one saying, fuck Captain Soko, fuck, Spock's father was Vulcan as a motherfucker, was great. But her teaching her is like, no, you are an atypical Vulcan, and that's okay. And her not feeling as much Vulcan, it kind of goes to what I was talking about last episode with Tendi. If we wanted to apply a queer reading to her character, I apply a trans reading to Tendi, but I would apply more of a queer reading to T'Lyn. And honestly, you could apply a queer reading to all of Lower Decks if you really wanted to. Not saying they're expressly queer, but metaphorically, the themes that resonate of her feeling like she is pushed out of society because of who she is. She doesn't fit what's supposed to be seen as the typical Vulcan. And so she feels like she is queer. She is different. And so, again, this doesn't say T'Lyn likes women or whatever. It's supposed to say those themes resonate with her as a character. And I really like seeing that relatability with her. It feels very, very relatable to all of us. I think not just queer folks. So I really do appreciate that heavily. And I thought there was a wonderful arc for her character, and being able to get there, but through Mariner saying it's okay to be you're still a Vulcan even if you don't fit what a Vulcan's supposed to be. And her learning that through the Cerritos crew, which is about you're still just as much Starfleet even if you're not what Starfleet's supposed to be, the Enterprises or whatnot. So loved that so much. And then ending the episode with T'Lyn and Mariner kind of having this nice moment heart to heart together, and Mariner just kind of going, T'Lyn was adorable because he was joking with her and teasing her, and I just love that moment in animation. It was well expressed. And then Tendi being like, oh, come on, I miss the embrace, I'll do anything, I thought was adorable. All of that was really wonderful. I thought that was the strongest piece of the episode. The other part of the episode that I really liked, not as strongly, but I still liked a lot, but I loved its resolution, was everything to do with Boimler and Shax. All of that was great, where Shax sort of takes Boimler off to try and do a test, at least Boimler thinks, and it's just slam poetry and doing puzzles and all this weird stuff. I love the charades where it's Constable Odo in the bucket. That's wonderful. And then Boimler sort of reacting at we also got an NX-01. Do not think I missed the Star Trek Enterprise reference. I saw my NX-01 Malcolm Reed boy, but I do like that Boimler sort of is what is this? This is just security. What you don't even do anything on here. But then seeing when they take back the ship from the Betazoids, that it is actually part of their job. They see they use these skills of calming themselves, taking care of themselves, all this stuff as part of how they work. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what was going on here specifically Boimler was Shax taking a holistic view of his job of we don't just protect your bodies, we protect your emotional well-being as well. So an emotional support security team, which is so wonderful and such a Star Trek-ian idea too, emotional support security team. Love that so much, and I love Shax for that, and I love him still treating Boimler, like I said earlier with Rutherford, like a baby bear, part of his pack. Again, so Star Trek. I adore it, and it's so sweet and so Star Trek an idea that the security team would be responsible for your mental health. The other thing that I forgot to mention too was the whole bit with the Betazoids and Freeman, and the Betazoids getting the two people's I sense that you two love each other. And it's well, I wouldn't be opposed as they beat them up, and then Freeman getting them to go against each other, and then them heading to the Romulan neutral zone. That was one aspect of the episode that felt a little bit forced. I get that they're emotional, but them going into the neutral zone felt okay, we need some sort of big stakes here that I don't think Lower Decks needs always these big stakes. So it could have just been enough that they need to get the ship back. But I get it. It did lead to a great joke though, which was the Romulans being what did you think? They were going to cross the neutral zone? We'll go lurk over there. I thought that was hilarious. So that led to a good joke, even though I thought the stakes were a little bit, escalated just for the episode. But it ended off the episode, I think, in an interesting way. It feeds into the larger arc of the season where we see the ship, and we get to see the outline of it, and so now Freeman and everyone knows. But again, felt a little bit let's give them some information, even though it kind of felt like it was tangential to what was going on, and there was no reason for the Betazoids to give Freeman here. This is one thing I'm noticing with this season's overall arc. While it has tangentially related to our main characters here and there, there was the reason that Tendi got sent to Orion was because of this thing as well. It hasn't really felt like it's been pertinent to our crew. And again, not that every episode needs to feel pertinent to them, but it still felt I don't know, it just felt a little tangential, and this whole storyline feels a little tangential. So I hope by within the next episode or two they tie this season-long arc back into our main characters in some way, so it doesn't feel like this thing that's happening like over there, and feels like much more part of what's going on with our crew. Because right now it just feels like it's sort of glommed on. Whereas previous seasons of the show, they've had arcs every single season, and while the stuff going on wasn't always related to our main characters, it still felt like it was tying a little bit better for my mind. Like and Buen Amigo, sending them to do a bunch of different things last season as well. So we'll see how it all shakes out, but it's probably more one criticism. It's not a bad storyline. I'm intrigued where it's going, and it has affected things a bit. I just hope it gets a little bit more tied in as we go forward. But with all that said, that's my thoughts on this episode. Another really fun one and a great T'Lyn episode. I love all your thoughts, though. Let me know in the comments what if there was another Everyone Wants to Fuck Each Other Voyager episode. But beyond all of that, I hope you all, my friends, live long and prosper.